How are y'all? Feel like a student again, teaching to the subject matter experts here. You all know me already, but I'll go through it for the people on the video. I'm Joe Culverhouse. I teach here in mass media. Primarily teach the writing subjects, so screenwriting. I don't teach the actual class, but the elements of it. Social media, transmedia, which we'll be talking more about in just a moment. My email is here if you need to reach out to me about anything. I'll be more than happy to answer any questions you have. So today we will be looking at preparing experiential learning course activities in arts-based courses. I'm sure you've seen examples of these experiential learning activities throughout, but I wanted to specifically tailor this towards the arts because there's a lot of confusion sometimes over what is and isn't truly experiential learning when it comes to our field. So before we jump in, we have these whiteboards, and I want to just get your brains going a little bit, get you on the right path. So, I can figure out how to open these. Right, and a white now. And
Thank you.
And I have two little things I want you to focus on here. I'm interested in your definition of experiential learning, so please don't Google or anything. Second, I'd like to lean into my field a little bit. You're probably wondering why I wrote a log line on the sideboard anyway. I'd like for you to try and come up with a 1 to 2 sentence log line for an activity that you could apply in one of your courses. Now, we'll be hammering home this as we go today, but I'd like to see what you have at the top of class, and we can compare it at the end. So if you're not familiar with a log line, it's just a little 1 to 2 sentence selling point for your idea. The log line we have over here on the board, hopefully you can guess the movie from it. A young janitor at MIT has a gift for mathematics, but needs help from a psychologist to find direction in his life. So what film is that? Good Will Hunting, yeah. So an effective log line is going to tell you everything you need. This one doesn't list our consequence, but it's kind of implied there. We'll take another 3 or 4 minutes on that. All right, and as we're finishing these up, we'll go ahead and start with the next portion of this, which is going to be the presentation of this. So I'm not going to make you stand or anything, but I would like you to just say your name, introduce yourself, and then read us your material, see where we're all at. So Dr. Savoy, would you like to start?
Yeah, Mike Savoy. I'm a faculty member here in mass media and also oversee the Honors College.
Oh, we're just doing introductions first?
We can do introductions first and then read the boards.
Oh, okay.
I'm flexible on that.
Read this too?
However, I'll let you decide.
Well, I was doing some revisions on some projects this morning, so I kind of, and I've been working with experiential learning is learning by doing.
Good.
That's what I was saying. Do you want my tagline or my blog?
Yes, please.
Discover the hidden subtext or culture of a location, find out what's happening that is not always obvious. And that's something we call city or places as text, where we send students out and make them do some observation and mapping and reflecting on what's happening in an environment, not just what the physical space is.
Okay, all right, thank you.
I'm Jamie Lando. I'm a professor in communication arts, also director of the Center for Excellence in Learning and Teaching and the Center for E-Learning. I wrote for EL, learning by doing that includes reflection and application of theory to a practical real-world setting or case study. My log line is Students Culture Jam VSU as a brand to critique its marketing and the social inequities of higher education.
Okay, thank you.
My name is Melissa Porterfield, and I teach in theater. And I also wrote Experiential Learning is Learning by Doing. And I had two I was toying with, but I'm going to say for my stage movement class, students apply Laban and Viewpoints techniques to the creation of a character in scene work with another student from class.
Okay, thank you.
What was the word? Laban?
Laban, yeah.
What is that?
It is a choreographer who came up with 8 different categories that apply to every move that human beings can make.
Okay, so that's a concept.
Yeah,
like a
so it's
theory.
like-
Got it. Okay.
Like punch, slash, glide, dab,
Cool.
blah, blah.
Okay, cool.
So what are we going to be doing today? We're going to provide a quick introduction to the QEP, and by quick, I mean I'm going to show you a link and briefly mention it, but you're all pretty familiar with it by this point, so I don't want to waste our valuable time by spending too much of it there. Then we're going to dive into Kolb's experiential learning cycle, the real meat and potatoes, the part we really need to stress, the part that most people need to hear the most, because that most common question is, well, I'm already doing this. How is this not experiential learning? It may very well be, but you need to be able to explain to us why. So we'll examine each of the 4 elements and view examples of how they can be applied. We'll develop a working draft that can serve as groundwork for your own QEP certification application, and we'll create an outline for an experiential learning activity. Congratulations, your log line was the first piece of that. So, as I mentioned, very quick here. If you're interested in a thorough explanation of the QEP, when we send this out, you will have this link here. If not, you can simply Google Valdosta State QEP, and it'll obviously be your first hit. This very long-winded explanation here, very technical. Essentially, we're focusing on those high-impact practices, and we're doing so in a manner that's easily codified. So, Kolb, raise your hand if you've dealt with this before. Everyone, yeah. Which is great. I like to really hone in on Disney examples with my classes as I teach, because they're the one area I know most of my students have all seen, so I'm not bouncing around a million different films asking, have you seen this? So keeping in line with that Disney, we can kind of think of Kolb as our Pocahontas example. It's all just in that circle, that loop that never ends, for those of you from my generation. But we do have our concrete experience, our reflective observation, our abstract conceptualization, and active experimentation. What does all that mean? We're going to go into it in a little more detail. For right now, just know that courses endorsed for the experiential learning include activities structured using this cycle. I will be basing these on 2 courses that I have certification for. I do need to tell you right off the bat, I will have actual examples for 2100. I taught it in the spring when it was certified. Transmedia is only offered in the fall, so I'm currently teaching it for the first time as an experiential learning certified course, so I'm not going to have as many examples with that. However, when I was piloting it last year, knowing that I was going to apply, I did try and incorporate some activities, so I will have some. They're not quite as tight-knit as I would like them to be, but they're there. So each activity, regardless of what you do, is going to have to qualify for one of these goals. For our examples today, each of these will hit goal number 1, the research and creative inquiry. For dance, I could see goal 2, the global citizenship, playing in more in dance or art or even theater. What am I thinking? Sculpture. I don't know why I couldn't think of that word, but yeah, I can definitely see the classes in the fine arts building in particular being able to hit that goal number 2. So getting into this intro to media writing, this is a very quick, just overview of source material, nothing deep here. We have a video of a student's end of the semester reflection where he reflected on the entire process. And then I provided you with an example of our schedule so you could kind of see the time frame of how I was doing this and when I was checking in with the students. I don't know, are y'all able to read that, or is it too small? A little too small. Well, essentially it was broken down over the last 4 weeks of the semester, and students understood that on Tuesdays they would be meeting with me to receive their brief. They would then take that brief, begin the research, and the production. On Thursdays, they knew they would have a blog due, and they knew that they would be discussing. I would check in on that blog, which was their work log, to make sure that everything was being met and offer feedback at that point, which is something we will talk more about. But for now, let's watch this little quick 1-minute video.
Social media has had a profound impact on mental health of college students. When discussing the overall effects of social media on college students, we can interpret that it can lead to depression, poor body image, and even cyberbullying. When we think of social media as an entity, we think of the good possibilities that could sprout from it, such as a means of communication between friends and family, a discussion forum for friendly debates, and etc. Unfortunately, social media has turned into a monster that has led to many negative effects on individuals' mental health, especially among college students. For instance, according to Medium.com, the most common issues associated with college students' mental health and social media use is depression, anxiety, low self-esteem, body image, sleeping problems, social isolation, and emotional difficulties. It also goes on to state in the article that nearly 42% of college students stated that anxiety caused from social media is a top priority in terms of reaching out for assistance.
So, you're probably wondering what that whole spiel was about, where it was coming from. We're going to get there. So right off the bat, we have our concrete experience. This is where you really need to provide students with the examples necessary to build that baseline understanding before simply going out and doing. What do these consist of? There's several different things they can be. They can be readings, demonstrations. And arts classes, a lot of times will, particularly for me, it becomes review and analyze film clips or images, or a combination of that with the readings. With this 2100 class, it was actually interesting because this kind of evolved as the semester went on, which may happen. So I'm going to read this verbatim in a minute, but I do want to take a second and explain. Initially, they're going to seem like two separate items, but they are connected, and I will explain why. So the concrete experience here was readings. Media students list sports talk anchors such as Adam Schefter or Stephen A. Smith as being their idols. They want that to be their career path. They want to be that talking head. And that was a consistent issue that I was seeing in 2100 with the students coming into the program. What they weren't understanding was you can't simply sit down behind a desk and just start reading or just start voicing your opinions. So I provided them examples of articles written by these talking heads. And then I showed them the videos that corresponded with that. The whole point of this was to drive home that you're not going to simply sit down and talk. You have to do the research beforehand. You have to write, and then you film it. So it's a process. What you saw, that reflection, was an example of a student translating their written article into the video article. So it wasn't the true reflection, but it was that part of the process. That we get to down here, students will create content designed to raise their awareness of the mental health assistance available to VSU students. Both of these exercises center around that mental health aspect. We were coming out of the pandemic, and there was a huge spike in mental health concerns with our students. So I wanted to address that while also hitting the SOIs or the SLOs for the course. So in 2100, the students created materials designed specifically to benefit themselves and their peers, since they weren't necessarily aware of what those resources were. It raised their awareness of the resources, but also simulated the daily task of a professional content creator, a position that many mass media graduates, particularly those interested in writing, will likely end up having as their kind of foot in the door in the media field. For transmedia storytelling, raise your hand if you've heard that term, if you're familiar with transmedia. Okay, so you've heard the term, but you're not familiar with it? Is that what you were? Okay. Okay. So transmedia, you may have heard it referred to as multi-platform storytelling. It simply means you have an entire story, but you're using multiple platforms to break that story. You're coming in at different points and building that world, making it have more depth, more content, but you're not simply adapting, you're building with each platform. So the way I teach it is I break it up with entertainment, then actual campaigns, because students tend to understand it more when I can give them that entertainment example. So if we take The Walking Dead, it was a comic book. The comic book evolved into a TV show. The TV show was not just an adaptation of the comics, though. It was new content based on the content from the comics. It then had a social presence where fans weren't just using social as a promotion tool, but were actually building fan fiction, interacting with the cast and crew. There were other items such as The Talking Dead, which you may be familiar with, which was a show that came on after, which again gave fans access to the cast and crew and the entertainment entity as a whole, and provided even more opportunities to build that world and expand upon it. Believe it or not, advertising is very instrumental in transmedia. The term integrated marketing in and of itself is transmedia. So what did we do with transmedia? Students spend the first half to 3/4 of the semester studying and analyzing existing campaigns. Then they create mock campaigns for each field, being entertainment, advertising, and public awareness, and will be critiqued by both me and their peers. During the final month of the semester, the students work to create, they work in groups to utilize the information learned and develop an entirely original transmedia campaign. My goal with this is to always use a local nonprofit organization. With the pilot, we use the Counseling Center because, again, I was focused primarily on raising awareness for mental health. So the students examine during the first half to 3/4 of the semester existing content and use that to build their own. So let's do a little practice with the concrete exercise. For the next, it probably won't take a full 5 minutes, probably 2 or 3. I want you to identify, you don't have to identify, you've already done that with your log line. Go back to that course log line that you wrote and try and give me a brief summary of what you think your concrete experience might be. And throughout, as I tell my students, that log line is going to serve as your blueprint. Keep going back to it. Make sure you're staying on track. Think of it like you're back in elementary school math. You should be able to check your work against your log line. All right, are we all good? We still working? Okay, I'm not going to have you share these right now. I'm going to have you just hold on to them, and we'll talk about them all at the end. So after you have your concrete exercise, we move on to the reflective observation. This is where individuals will reflect on the concrete experience and review what occurred during the activity and the experience itself. This is one area where there's often some confusion. This reflection does need to be specific. It doesn't need to just be an emotional reflection. It needs to be a reflection on the process as a whole. It can be done through writing blogs, diaries, peer analysis and feedback, critiques, short reports, journaling, etc. So let's take a look at how we approach this in the 2 media classes. In Intro to Media Writing, we use short reports. So the students provide short reports of the project at multiple checkpoints. These reports will detail what students have done individually, as well as what groups have accomplished as a whole. At each point, students will be expected to apply the work to the information they've learned from the media examples, as well as their own research. The goal of these reports is to monitor student understanding and engagement, particularly due to the freedom the assignment provides at the 2000 level. So this was a way for me to weekly make sure that they were staying on top of their research, but also make sure that the work itself, even though that's not inherent within a reflective observation, for this 2000 level class, I felt it important to also check it at this point. And again, I apologize, but I do want to read these as close to verbatim as I can, as painful as that may be. But let's take a look at it. The same student we saw the video from, an example of a block. So again, we're dealing purely with that social media portion of the class and the assignment. As you notice, the student says he was able to find better sources. The week before this, it came to my attention that the students were not familiar with Galileo at all. So I shifted from providing them the examples to having them go out and do the research themselves that week. I wanted them to get that experience with Galileo as they moved through the program. I generally kept this, this one was pretty vague. Like in general, the blog prompt was pretty vague. It was pretty much describe what you did this week and describe your research process for the week. Oh, sorry, I didn't see you.
Comment that I think that's pretty specific. You know, what is your activity? In fact, of all the reflections we do on honors, that's the first question we ask of every project. What is your activity? Because we want them to articulate that. So I think that's a really good one.
Yeah. I'm not saying, I was just curious because
I appreciate the questions.
So I was,
Absolutely.
this was very focused, so that's why I was wondering.
It's nice to build on that initial one, though.
So, intro to media writing, we use the blogs there. You'll notice that this is going to sound very similar, even though I'm shifting from short reports to journaling. But let me read it to you and we'll talk about it. Students will maintain an online weekly journal throughout the month of the project. So again, in 3175, we were building up to this. It was not throughout the entire semester. In this journal, students will briefly detail the work performed during the given period. However, more importantly, students were to discuss how the work has been directly beneficial to the project and what could be done differently going forward. Following each section of the project, students will receive checkpoint evaluations of their journaled work. I examine the quality of the work being done while also requiring students to reach basic length and word counts. This was one area when I was piloting it that I did not really focus on. I was focused on the heavy activity. So this is something that I'm looking forward to putting into place in about 3 weeks in that class. But the key difference being, I wanted students to focus on how the work was beneficial, not just the work itself. So, again, let's go back to those Vanna White whiteboards and apply our reflective observations to that log line. And I will again go back to the primary slide. But again, remember that the focus of this is for students to explain and outline what they have observed and make the real world connections to the material while reflecting, not just giving that emotional evaluation. So let's move on to step 3. Our abstract conceptualization. During this, individuals reflect on previous experiences and develop observations about these experiences. At this stage, the learner makes comparisons between what they have done, reflect upon what they already know. They may draw upon theory from textbooks for framing and explaining events, models they are familiar with, ideas from colleagues, previous observations, or any other knowledge that they have developed. So what can these be? These are your projects, your analogies, concept mapping, framing events, etc. How do we approach this in Intro to Media Writing? We chose to utilize the framing and explaining events. Students will engage in in-class discussions at set points during each stage of the process. Students will first present updates with their groups to the class. After each group is given a brief presentation, students will partner with classmates not in their working group in order to discuss and debate different approaches or tactics taken by the different groups. This will allow students to share difficulties or concerns with each other, as well as allow the instructor to monitor participation, engagement, and learning. Furthermore, this will provide students the opportunity to reflect on what they might do differently in the future and provide tangible experience that directly translates to daily tasks faced by professional content creators. Students will be encouraged to discuss why and how content is made, monitor and analyze, and what adjustments or corrections are made to address any issues. So any questions about the 2100? How do we approach this in transmedia, or how will we be approaching this in transmedia? Before I allow students to begin the actual production of their campaign material, they'll be required to submit a detailed proposal outlining how, and more importantly, why specific activities will be completed on each platform. For example, students will need to explain how the tone of their PSA matches the research data, and why the particular PSA works better for TV than radio, or why a particular social media platform was chosen to broadcast a given message. This will allow students to analyze the technical aspects of the project along with the creative. I'll provide feedback at this stage to help guide students towards the proper platforms. So while I haven't put this into practice yet in transmedia for this project, a colleague within the department did guest lecture this class one day last semester and focused the transmedia campaign on sports. Given that assignment, or given that presentation, students were given an assignment that very closely reflects what I'm asking for here. And I do have an example of that to share with you. Are you able to see that clearly? So I'm just going to walk you through it. We're not going to read it all. It is 8 pages worth of data, so I'm not going to. So up front, just identifying the who, what, when, where, why, and how. I made them do this assignment on the Tokyo 2020 Olympics, aka 2021. What they were doing was identifying how media was presented, where the media was presented, and why it was presented in those places. So we have the identification portion, we have an analysis, and then we have examples and justification. So the student would tell me, I think this particular student gave me the classic Facebook is utilized to keep the older generations engaged and to reach older demographics, while TikTok and Twitter were used to reach younger, etc. But again, this is very similar to what I'm going to be asking for from the transmedia class before I release them to actually go into production. I want them to know why they're doing what they're doing before they do it. Any questions about 3175? Okay. So, yeah, part 3, back to the whiteboards. Make sure you're referencing your log line and staying on that clear track. So lastly, we have that active experimentation. Individuals begin the process of testing existing ideas by creating new experiences. For learning to be useful, most people need to place it in a context that's relevant to them. If one cannot see how the learning is useful to one's life, then it's likely to be forgotten very quickly. The doing. So how can we do this? We can do this through case studies, role play, problem solving, field work, simulations, authentic applications, just the hands-on active part of it. So let's see. How do we approach this in Intro to Media Writing? We use the authentic applications. So students present their completed campaigns to the class. They include all research as well as examples of blog posts, a selected video essay, and a portion of the script used to create the video. Any exemplary work created by the students will earn the opportunity to be screened at the end of semester mass media showcase. So not only did I have them present, I gave them the incentive of, if it's good, it's going to be in the showcase. How's it going to be applied in transmedia? Very similarly, again through the authentic applications. The project culminates in a 10-minute presentation of the material, a 30-second radio PSA, a 30-second TV PSA, a completed social media campaign proposal utilizing at least 5 platforms, and the research material, with the best material selected to be implemented by the representative organization. So the goal is to find a nonprofit that is interested in this, that our students can create something tangible for. I do have PSAs for the Counseling Center that I still need to get on VSU TV, but the quality was such that I was able to get 3 of these that we'll actually be putting on the air as soon as we can. So by researching the client, receiving specific directives from the client, and generating actual content, students receive practical experience in the field of multi-platform media management. By completing the creative process from conceptualization to implementation in the fields of audio, video, and digital social media, students are given the opportunity to demonstrate the skills they've learned and developed in the mass media program in a manner more involved than simply answering test questions or submitting a one-time assignment using pre-assigned directives. The students demonstrate not only their practical skills, but their analytical and problem-solving skills as they develop wholly unique material based on the data they have researched and gathered themselves. So literally turn these kids into content creators over the course of this class. And I do have an example of one of these campaigns for you.
Sometimes the burden of being a college student can be too much to carry alone. Fortunately, you don't have to. The Valdosta State University Counseling Center is here for you. Whether it's the stress and anxiety of the semester or the adjustment of being away from home, whatever it is, support is only a phone call away. All VSU students are eligible. Services are free and completely confidential. Visit our website at www.valdosta.edu/counseling for more information about how you can find support today.
Now, I do need to stress that I am not a production professor, so I'm not grading those on the technical elements. I'm grading those on content. Okay, so any questions about that? All right, then let's wrap up these whiteboards. Attempt to create a draft for the active experiential portion or active experimentation portion of the application, utilizing the information we just covered. And if you want to just give me a thumbs up when you're good. All right, thank you. We'll get a little exit ticket. While you're working on this, I've got another slide, but I want to go ahead and get you going. I just need you to identify 2 ways in which your understanding of experiential learning has grown through this workshop. Individually then, I would like you to try and rewrite this log line you crafted at the beginning of class using the material that you've learned over the last 50 minutes.
So, what's my understanding of experiential learning?
Oh,
Yeah.
Melissa.
Melissa, I'm sorry.
That's okay. I didn't know if there were. I didn't know if my colleagues were off the line. So that's okay. What did I learn? If that's my question.
What grew?
Oh, great. I'm not sure how I grew.
So you knew all this?
I feel like this is a rehash. I'm trying very hard to fight my own tendency, which is to, I think, and the tendency of that of my students, which is, I feel often in arts that the fact that that we're forced to approach this in the QEP in a non-cyclical order, but we start with concrete experience, tends to be a huge block for both faculty in creating these moments and for students, because we tend to believe that we are starting from abstract conceptualization. So I am trying to expand my idea of how to view these parts out of what is my tendency of my natural order, I guess.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
I think for me, and I've done I've integrated Kolb into my dissertation actually. So Kolb's a lot more expansive than what we give him credit for with the experiential cycle. And it is just one model.
And it's a cycle.
That's
So
right.
you can
Right,
probably start at any
And
time.
again, I think, I believe it's a cycle. In order to apply for this, we have to put them in a particular order that we're given and chronicle the process, starting with concrete experience.
Yeah.
So for me, trying to reimagine how I'm putting the activity of experimentation into boxes that way is what I'm trying to expand in this moment.
What I think I liked that Joe you showed and referenced is, especially on the transmedia side, especially with the sports piece, whether we're looking at things sequentially in a linear fashion, or there's some other sort of information that can be imparted. I'm not a big sports fan, but after the event has happened, like a football game or the Olympics, people want to know who won. So you do start at a different point, and that is related in how we present that information also. It's not like, we're going to save it till the end. No, we think this is what happened, and then you kind of backtrack from there. So
Right.
I think it's perfectly acceptable to do that. And
Yeah.
I think for what I'm learning from this, and I've been to several of these, I've been doing this for a while, and I still learn, is that how do we make it clearer for the students? I think our intentions are pretty clear as to what we want to happen, and we've used these labels and these models to identify what we do, but boy, it's bridging that gap between what we know, what we're presenting, and then what we want the students to know. That is a major challenge. And every time I do one of these, I get a little bit more clarity. So.
And I think trying, again, to re-examine those categories of what we're doing
So
within
can
each
you
of these.
walk me through what you wrote down? Because I guess I'm not understanding why, even if you do it in a different, you start with 4, right? I don't understand. I'm unsure until I hear your example.
So
Alright,
can
so
I?
fill out the
So for
form.
me,
Can I ask-
So I think in terms of like,
Walk us through
in
it.
terms of a creative moment, I
Yeah.
think most artists see the thing that they make
Okay.
as the concrete experience. So not having performance in my case be the concrete experience, trying to back that up to something else is what I am learning in this moment.
Got it.
Right? So my question, my student's question, as you very rightly put it, is how is concrete experience not the end goal? Or perhaps reflection on a concrete experience and end goal, but how is abstract conceptualization not where we start? And so going back and saying, okay, I guess the concrete experience of this is rather somehow the learning of the skills and the techniques. And
Correct.
that's how I relabel that.
Let's go to Dr. Walker real quick.
Yeah, I was gonna say, there's kind of two ways to look at it. In terms of like the skill basis, you might be exemplifying said skill and then maybe kind of teaching them about the process. But the other thing could be kind of from an arts-based perspective. For most folks, it's we're all creative individuals, but we're all drawing from something, and that something
Right.
is the concrete experience.
Yeah.
Right. So again, that's what I said. So this time I put, this is the learning of the skills. in the
Okay,
first
okay, so
category.
I'd love to hear you walk through, not because I think this is good for the webinar for people, so you put, so give,
So my concrete experience was
Yeah.
put efforts and viewpoints into bodies, somatic practice, watch demonstration of others, read and discuss concepts, participate in simulations or basic
and
experiments.
read that theory that y'all were talking about.
Right. Well, and again, yeah,
Yeah.
do that theory.
The point I was trying to make though about Kolb being more expansive than this is
Yeah.
there are probably some other facets of Kolb's work that can be incorporated into this to give a little bit more context. And I like that we're looking at these workshops from different discipline perspectives because there are differences. We know that teaching the arts is different than teaching.
Yeah, but she just wants to fill out the form.
No, I'm saying, but also my students want to know, why is it that they don't see, I think, this idea that the thing that if I am working on a play, how is the final thing that I put up not the concrete experience? And so trying to
Keep going through your
explain,
2, 3, and 4.
right, to others, how a concrete experience can be something else in getting there is what I'm trying to work on. So if you want me to read all four of them? Okay. So for reflective observations, I wrote that is a reflection on our own tendencies. What are your own bodily habits in this moment? Set goals, identify which concepts of Laban and viewpoints are muddy and or clear, and then analyze the text and the character / brainstorming. What will I do? How will I do it? Why will I do it that way?
How are they going to do that reflection?
How are they going to do that?
Yeah, like are they going to talk it to you? Or are they going to write it? Or
Both. So so there's a written reflection that is they have to address X number of points, including identifying concepts, setting goals, doing analyzing tendencies. And then there's another written part, which is the script scoring or analyzing a text. Like, I read this and my first thoughts about my character are this. In this scene, I am this. In this scene, I do this. I'm making these choices because it helps to achieve my objective in that way. Yeah.
Okay. I think that's great. And then 3, abstract.
Rehearsals and experimentation.
Yeah.
Getting feedback from faculty and peers. Are your choices appropriate and legible? Propose the theories that you're using. When they get up there and they do something and we say, well, I can't tell which of the efforts you're using in that moment, they have to say, like, well, I think I was using this. And then feedback from the class becomes, or me becomes, well, you may have thought that you were doing that, but nobody can recognize it, so maybe you aren't actually doing that at the moment. What else can we do that might use that effort more effectively?
Rehearsal, I think fits perfectly for that.
Right.
And then 4?
Yes, the only thing I can think is it's authentic application. I mean, it is the final performance of that work, right?
Yeah. I think that's awesome.
No, I think so too, but again, what I was trying to say about Kolb's extension of the cycle that I think we miss often is that Kolb also notes that those cycles, it creates a continuum. And
Right,
there we go.
there's this right here, and there's a reflective and active continuum, abstract, concrete continuum, and each discipline falls in different quadrants. So you may look, is what I'm doing with the students more on the abstract side and active, or is it more on the concrete reflective? So in plotting this, and he does a lot of work in this area also, you can kind of discern, where do you fall more? And again, I looked at it because the arts, we definitely have, it moves, doesn't it? I mean, we go through these, and the cycle plugs into these movements. So it does help you sort of define what's useful for your students based upon where you're moving along these sort of continuums also. So I found that to be quite useful for me.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think you got it.
Yeah,
I feel good about it.
Because I think from the student perspective, it's just them understanding, like, how do they get to that point and then realizing, like, this wasn't a one-time cycle. We want this to keep on going. Hopefully it starts in your freshman year and it keeps going through your senior year.
Great.
Great. So we are out of time. I will say, if you have any questions, my email is on the slides. It's wjculverhouse@valdosta.edu. I would like you to at least think about how you could rearrange that log line. And if you want to save that, congratulations, you've basically completed your application.
I took a picture of mine
Nice.
so that I can.
I think that was a solid choice.
Yeah.
Every time I come to one of these, it becomes another little revelation. Thank you for the work.